2, 3, 4.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Power of Music Thinking. My name is Christoph Zürn, and this is the podcast for people with a musical heart and a wicked job. We're looking for stories, insights and tools from the big world of music to inspire leaders and followers to listen, tune, play and perform in whatever field you're operating. What is the use of standing still for 10 minutes? I was asking myself when I saw a post on social media. It was a double picture of a man with a mobile phone around his neck, displaying some data, and another picture showed the view he saw at that moment. I learned that he stood there for 10 minutes without any movement, listening to the sound that was already there. There were many pictures like this, and I decided to get into contact. So, today we're in Oslo. We speak with Alexander Refsum Jensenius, a professor of music technology at the University of Oslo, a book author, a music researcher, and a researching musician working in the fields of embodied music cognition and new interfaces for musical expression. Alexander shares with us his experiences while performing and testing with artistic methods of embodied listening and how people experience music and sound. This goes from experiments with and without the conductor of a symphony orchestra to the sounds of our kitchen appliances. And we talk about his motion capture lab, where a person's exact location and micro movements can be detected while they hear different kinds of music and how the researchers can understand what moves them. And Alexander shares insights about the Norwegian Championship of Stand Still, where until now thousands of people have participated, and the winner is the person with the lowest average velocity on standing the stillest over some time. And Alexander explains the interplay of body and mind, and he reveals some secrets on how to move people, for example, on the dance floor, or to calm them down. It all has to do with our BPM, the average heartbeat of about 60 beats a minute. So, without too much ado, let's get into it. Hello, Alexander. Welcome to the Power of Music Thinking.
Hello, nice to be here.
This actually is something like I thought that they have invented the internet for many, many years, or 20 or 30 years, so like I'm using it. So you go online, you see something, you get interested, and then you get in contact with the person. And actually that's what happened. So I went on Mastodon, and I don't know if people know what Mastodon is. It's like a new Twitter, but not from a billionaire, to put it like this. More distributed, and it's more from the people. So I think like the internet was meant from the beginning. And I just saw what you did, and I thought, hey, wow, this is interesting. Your standing still project. And before we talk about this, and there's much more to share, there's always a question I ask my guests in the beginning, and it's like, what is the first sonic experience or album or live performance that had an impact on you?
Well, it's a tricky question. There are different, depends on the music or the sound. If you take the sound first, I think the first sound I remember was the kind of the very acute silence of Norwegian stave church. My father was a medieval architect, or he was working on medieval architecture, and drawing stave churches in Norway. We have these are like from the medieval times, 1,000 years old. So every summer we spent out at the stave church around the country here in Norway. And as a child, then going into a stave church has a very kind of different sound. So it's a very different soundscape. because it's made of wood. So it's not the kind of the cathedral type of sound that you would expect with a long reverberation, but it's really a very dampened type of sound. And I can't remember exactly how old I was, around 3, 4, I guess, just sitting and playing inside of the state church and with this kind of really dampened sound around me, which is very different from what you normally would experience. I mean, outside there is always kind of some kind of nature sounds, and in other buildings, I mean, it's more made of concrete or other things, you will have kind of more reverberation. So that's I just still keep that kind of sensation with me of this kind of dampened wooden 1,000-year-old kind of soundscape. So that's for the sounds.
Wow, how big is a church like this?
So they're pretty small, actually. So built of wood, but they are in square meters, 100 or so. Pretty small,
Okay.
small
Nice.
wooden state churches.
Oh, interesting. And also the link with medieval. So you might already have some kind of music from the Middle Ages that you would imagine that would have been played there. Was there music also in church?
No, there was no music during those periods played in those churches. So it was really just the kind of the silence, or the so-called silence of the churches, that kind of still gave me a very kind of bodily experience. And in many ways, I mean, thinking about it now, kind of, and also thinking about the research I'm doing now, I mean, it definitely resonates.
Right. So it was the start in standing still or being in stillness.
And listening to environments, you could say.
Yeah. And what would be the link to music, albums, or performances?
Well, in terms of albums and performances of this, I mean, much later, I was very heavily inspired by John Cage's 433, which is a well-known piece where the pianist originally walked on stage and sat down at the piano, opened the score, and basically just sat there without playing anything, and then turned the sheet and then continued to sit there, and then after 4 minutes and 33 seconds would rise up, take the score, and walk out. So that's the whole performance. And I heard and saw this as a performance when I began my studies around 19, 20 years old, and it was very powerful for me then. I mean, this is a piece that many people have heard about. Not that many have actually seen it in performance, and I saw it performed before I actually had heard about it. So it was a very interesting experience, because the idea is that you will listen to the so-called silence of the space, but as you're sitting there, you realize that there is so much going on, both in the space itself and also around with people and being around, doing all sorts of sounds, etc. But this kind of so-called background sounds are not really foregrounded normally, because we just think about them as being there. It's really the background. And I guess the point of John Cage was really to foreground it and really have people pay attention to what's going on around us.
Absolutely. There's let's say nowadays we would say mindfulness aspect in it, to realize what's already there, and also that you realize that there are sounds that are very far, like a plane flying over, that your brain just had erased because the brain said, "Oh, that's not interesting." Or if you're alone, and actually I thought about this when you said you were in church, you also hear your body noise, your breath,
sure.
or anything else. So it's really like unites you with everything that's audible. Beautiful. I did this once with a conference with 120 people. And we didn't do the piano version. We did it with a choir. So I think it was 8 people standing there, and there was the get going signal. And also because it's a 3-part piece, so you have to you need two more signals. and without telling the audience what it is. So that was really like people first they have their question mark, then they try to understand, is there a noise? And then they realize, oh, it's about us. So it was really like really nice, great piece. Thank you for sharing this. Alexander, will you tell a little bit about yourself, what you're doing right now, and then we can segue into the Standing Still project that brought us together.
Yeah, no. So I'm a professor of music technology at the University of Oslo, and many people wonder what a music technologist actually does. And the short answer to that, I guess, is that music technology, as I see it, is as a field, as a discipline, is the combination of the techne and the logos. So it's about the tools and how we do things, make music, analyze music, etc. But also the thinking, the logos, the knowledge that we gain through this and with this and for this. So music technology as a discipline involves then both the making of different types of machinery and analysis techniques and programming code and whatnot involved in all sorts of musicking. But it also involves the kind of more fundamental research questions underlying this, which ties into more general information theory, but also a lot of music psychology and cognition. I mean, how do we experience the world, etc. Because, for example, if you want to capture sound with a microphone and a sound card, you need to know a lot about what sound is, how it is generated, produced in the first place, how it works in an environment in terms of the acoustics, how it can be recorded and filtered, etc. And also then processed as well later on. So that's what I'm kind of teaching as a professor. And in terms of my research, I started out doing more perhaps traditional music technology, you could say, in terms of recording and composing, producing, performing. Now I kind of zoomed more in on what I call embodied music technology, where I am interested in the body, the human body, and how the human body responds to music and musical sound, and also how we can use the human body to produce musical sounds in novel ways. So I call myself both a music researcher and a research musician, because I also like to then I do more traditional scientific things in our lab with students doing experiments and these things. But I also perform and test how I can use more artistic methods to gain new insight about music as well. And again, using different types of computer systems and these things.
Nice. And as a sort of self-experiment, you started the Standing Still.
Yes, that's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about this? How did you come to the idea? But, you know, if I think back to your first sonic experience, so it's not so far away from it, isn't it?
Well, I mean, thinking back at it makes sense. But I mean, there were a few decades in between there where I didn't really think much about standing still. In fact, I started working more with dancers because I was interested in the human body. So in the early 2000s, I created various types of interactive music systems for dance, basically where the dancer could walk on stage and through various types of sensing, cameras, etc., would be able to create music on the fly. So they would basically, instead of dancing to music, they would create music while dancing, as kind of becoming more like a musician in a way. So I worked then with relatively large-scale body motion in terms of dancers moving on a stage. We also took this into the lab, looking more at how we could look at people's body motion and understand more about how they process musical sound. So we did a series of studies where people were coming into the lab. We played music to them and asked them to move, basically, to music, either to tap along, to nod their heads, to dance, to conduct, to trace the sounds in the air, etc. And
what kinds of music did you use?
Any type of music, really. I mean, we have been testing many different things. And the idea has really been to tease out, how do people actually experience music? Because we are very bad at talking about our experiences. but by looking at what people do, we understand more about what they pay attention to. So we did a lot of these studies, and I eventually also got more into the field of motion capture, which is what people typically use to create animation movies and these things. And we have a motion capture lab now here at my center. And the idea there is that you can get a very detailed rendition of how you move in space. And then one day, back in 2010, I worked with a dancer in the space, and I said that, well, this system is very, very good. I mean, it can record motion with a millimeter accuracy. And she looked at me and asked, "Really? Are you sure?" And this was just a saying. I hadn't tested it. So I said, well, let's try. And we put on the mocap suits, and we said, well, let's stand here for, say, 10 minutes.
Maybe you have to explain the suits.
So the suit is more it's more like a kind of sports looking thing where you have this reflective markers that you put on the body, and then you have cameras around you, and then through the cameras you are able then to capture the exact location of these markers in the space. Wow. So you get this kind of skeleton model out of where you are, and with it then a kind of a millimeter precision of where you are in the space.
So to see all these micro movement that also because a body can't stand still.
Exactly. So that's the thing, right? But we hadn't looked at that at all, because I've been looking at large scale motion. I mean, the dancer moving around the space, etc. But then we decided, okay, let's stand here for 10 minutes without moving. And what we found was extremely fascinating. We got this very noisy signal, but indeed the system is able to capture this. And we looked at the signal, which, if you plot it, it looks more or less like noise in a way. So it's kind of the noise of the body. But then when you zoom in, you see that there are certain things happening in that signal. You have kind of a slightly longer kind of curves that feel somehow similar to the respiration. I mean, our breathing patterns. This system is so detailed that it can even pick up the pulse of the heart. The heart rate can also even be seen in this data, showing up as spikes. And then every 2 to 3 minutes, there were also these spikes in the signal, kind of that I didn't really know about at the time, but that is kind of like a postural adjustment that everyone does once in a while.
These micro movements that you...
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of when I became really interested in, okay, there is something here. There is something in this noise. There is a signal here. And I became curious about, okay, what is actually going on in a body standing still? And then, of course, as a music researcher, I'm also interested in, okay, what if I play music to people then? What happens then? Will it change the way you move?
Now, that's interesting. But... How did it work? So people came in, get the suit. You have your camera or what else kind of equipment, and then you ask them to stand still for, let's say, 10 minutes or even longer. Yeah. And then you play different kinds of musics.
Yes, yeah, that's the idea. So play music of around half a minute or so. I mean, not too long, not too short. We have over the years now, since 2010, I've organized the Norwegian Championship of Standstill to have more people to come into the lab to do this. So it's kind of been a competitive element as well. And we've been playing different types of music people.
Hang on. What does it mean? Does it mean that the championship is who can stand at stillest, or?
Yes, yeah. So the winner is the person with the lowest kind of average velocity, the one standing the stillest over time.
But they have to stay, not sit, because a yogi, for example, would be in the Champions League of your your competition.
You need to stand straight up and down on the floor for 10 minutes, and then we're playing these different musical excerpts, also with silence in between, so that we have a control. And and then the person that's able to stand the stillest wins the championship.
Well, that's nice. So all the listeners that think, oh, that's interesting, and I don't know how it works, they can do it by themselves, isn't it? Sure. So just stay together or distribute it in a room and get a DJ with 30 seconds sound files.
Exactly, or longer if you like. And the interesting thing was that when I started researching this, well, everybody or many people say that, well, music moves you. That's been a saying, but nobody had actually done any empirical research on this. There's just been kind of anecdotal that music moves us. So I kind of set out then to really check whether music actually moves people and if we can find empirical evidence for that.
Were there any, let's say, surprising results where you thought, like you'd say, if you get a punk piece, would everybody after 30 seconds be a headbanger, or what can I imagine?
Yeah, no, the interesting thing is that we've done this many times, and I've had almost 1,000 people participating in the championship. So we have a lot of data. And we do see that dance music does indeed make people move a little bit more than other types of music. So that's good for everyone producing and making dance music. But not any type of dance music even. So it's particularly music with a beat per minute rate of a little bit faster than 120 BPM. So that's interesting as well, because there have been other studies showing that the human body has a resonant frequency in everyday actions at around 2 hertz, which is the same as 120 BPM. So a lot of dance music, if you look at there are other people who have been calculating the average of typical dance music, and the average is around 128 BPM. And that's interesting because it's a little bit faster than the typical comfortable kind of frequency range that we are moving in when we're just walking, for example. And if you ask people to clap, they would typically clap at 120 BPM. Also, marching is at 120 BPM, etc. So we believe that exactly because dance music is a little bit faster than kind of our natural frequency, that's what kind of gives us the urge to move in a way.
Okay.
So that's it's a little bit tweaking it a little bit, because we also tested it. If you go up to 140 BPM, for example, it doesn't work that way necessarily. And also if you go below, it doesn't work either. So it's particularly around that range. It's particularly kind of moving in a way. But also there needs to be a certain level of complexity in music, but not too complex either. So we tested this with also very simple kind of metronome, simple beats.
Yeah.
That does not work so well. If you have too complex, like experimental jazz, that doesn't work too well either. But kind of medium complex dance music with some syncopation, kind of a little bit off, typically what you would find on the dance floor, does actually indeed work.
Oh, and does the sound of the instrument has an influence, or is it just the beat, the rhythm?
Well, we haven't. There are so many variables here, so we haven't systematically tested the effect of instrumentation, but we have looked at some changes in the frequency range. So in electronic dance music, there is something called kind of the break routine, which is something that happens after you have a regular beat for a while. Then you come to a point in the song where everything, typically the beat will stop and everything will dissolve a little bit, and there you'll also often see that the frequency range will go down. So you would kind of have more like a bass-like type of sounds, followed by an increase in both frequency and tempo, and then you go back to what we call the drop, where you kind of drop back into the groove again. And this you find in very many dance tracks. You find this thing that it happens kind of out in the piece, and it's kind of a way of exciting people. And so that's there you also have like an instrumentation frequency component to this as well.
And with frequency, we have to explain to people that are not in our language. So it's the
so
higher
it's kind
sounds
of the
and lower sounds.
Yeah, it's the brightness of the sound in a way. You can say the brightness goes up there as part of this drop, and that excites people as well. So we see an impact of that as well.
Sounds interesting, and interesting in the way that certain musicians know this because they see the effect that people dancing to a certain way. So it's not like scientific, and then you make scientific music, for example, because if you research this and you explain it like that, this could be, let's say, an instruction for a DJ or a music band to influence the movements of the people.
Sure. Yeah, so this is, some of our findings are quite make sense, I think, for composers and producers and etc. that know these things, but perhaps don't know why it happens. So, I mean, as researchers, we also try to explain why this happens and kind of also name it. And also, again, as a music technologist, I'm interested in also how it's possible to do these things interactively so that we can create systems that can, for example, adjust to a group of people dancing and then automatically make better music in a way, in the sense that it will adjust to the people that is listening to it and can adjust to their tempo and then increase and help them, for example, to move more. That could be in a dance context, or if you're running, for example, the music can also adjust to you and help and push you to run a little bit faster, for example, based on the kind of the rhythm and the tempo that you're in.
So there's, in that sense, also linked to, let's say, sound healing or let's say mind hacks we had in one of the earlier podcasts to influence us with the music. For example, now we talk about movement, and this, if I get it right, if 120 is the bass and you make it the bass line and you make it quicker, people have the urge to also adapt. But if you would do it less, like 80 BPM, so would then people slow down and would be a little bit more quiet?
Yeah, that's a good question, and we have started researching this, but we have much more to do here. It's not as simple as that, unfortunately, perhaps you could say. We tested different types of music, and for example, we found that typical meditation music, which you would perhaps believe would calm people down, doesn't necessarily do so. I mean, and right now, our reasoning there is that if you have very kind of drony, swooshy type of music, it's also a bit unstable. So it kind of doesn't help and guide you. So in fact, very boring pop music, 4/4 pop music, actually makes people move less than, for example, meditation music, which is interesting and perhaps a bit counterintuitive. So, but this is something we are now looking more into as well, and try to figure out, okay, what does it actually take to physically move or make people move less? And also, ideally, since we also work from what we call an embodied cognition paradigm, the idea is that also the body and mind works closely together, so that it's really impossible to separate them properly. And that also means that if you calm down the body, you will also calm down the mind, and vice versa. But so far, I mean, there are still many open questions in this research.
Yeah. I'm just thinking out loud. There is the rhythm thing, or what you just said. If 120 is the baseline, you do it to 128, and then they move, but they don't do when it's 140, for example. You just mentioned, and the other way around it's the same. So if you go from 120, maybe I'm just making up to 110, this would maybe have a more calming effect than going to 80 or 70.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this is the type of things we're now kind of continuing with in our, we do this championship once a year, and then we have a new hypothesis each year. So we it takes time to do research like this. But on the other hand, there were so many interesting questions really that we're trying to deal with, and ultimately also to really try to get the empirical evidence to support these theories.
Right. I just heard a story about if you have to reanimate a person, you have to do it in a certain rhythm and a certain beat. And someone told me that staying alive, staying alive, that this would be the right beat. But I think it's less than 120, isn't it?
I'm not sure about that one, actually. I haven't checked.
But yeah, it's just something I heard, and maybe interesting. So because people told me, okay, when you have to reanimate, how quick? So if you're maybe stressed by yourself, you might do it too quick. So this was something. Okay, if you have this song in your mind, staying alive, and this was sounds like a pun, but it might save lives.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
You told me that before our talk you just did your stand still. What is it? Moment ritual? How do you call it?
Yeah, so now this year I'm working on writing up a book called Still Standing, based on all my research into standing still. And as part of that research, I decided to test it on myself. So I have made this ritual now where every day I'm standing still for 10 minutes. And the idea here is that I will then also collect data on myself and have 365 different recordings to also understand more about the differences over time. Because some people have asked me, do you improve, for example, over time? And also, does it matter when during the day you stand still and what you have eaten and all sorts of different things? So that's why I'm curious about testing on myself. It's a small kind of empirical data set in that sense, but it's long in the sense that I have many recordings of myself. So I'm kind of exploring this now, kind of my individual differences from day to day of standing still. So that's kind of one part of that project. But the other part of the project is related to a new research project I've started up, which looks at the impact of the environment on our lives. The background. So this is back to the kind of what we started talking about, where what is the background and of our lives and how does it impact us? So every day I'm standing still in a new room. I decided to only work in indoor environments for simplicity's sake. So I find a room. And I set up my video recorder and audio recorder, and also capture my own respiration and motion.
How do you do this?
I stand still for 10 minutes.
Oh, and what's your equipment? Could everybody do this?
Everybody could do this. I'm using a normal, it's a GoPro camera, 360 camera. So because I want to capture the whole space, and I use also a commercial. It's an ambisonics microphone. It's a particular microphone with 4 capsules, so that it captures the 360-degree kind of surround sound of the room.
So also everything that's behind you. So you really like you hear, like you stand. It's not like stereo, what we hear now, but it's like really everything also sounds behind you.
Yeah, that's the idea, to capture the whole space. And the idea here is then that I now will get also these recordings from one new room every day. So I will have 365 of these when I'm done. And then I will look at, my standstill, and there's a lot of data there, and look at the correlation to the space I'm in. And also for the ambient project, I will also look at the audio and video separately, independent of my standstill, just to get an idea of basically the environments that I'm in.
Can we hear what you just heard when you stood still?
Sure. Yeah.
4 minutes before.
So I have some examples here of, and this is from standing still in a technical corridor below my office at the university. One of the tricky things also about doing this thing is, and since I need a new room every day, I need to really explore the buildings I'm in to find new spaces. This is number 250. So I've been standing in many spaces at the university, but of course also other places. So I have this recording where in the beginning of this recording, in this technical room, it was a quite loud ventilation noise from the ventilation system of the building. And it's quite fascinating. I mean, we can listen to short excerpts of this, because and I didn't know when I started that it would stop, but it did stop. But it stopped in a very musical way. So I have an excerpt here, which is around 20 seconds long or something, which is a few minutes into the recording, but where you hear this ventilation noise, and and then it stops. So that's kind of this transition thing, and the fascinating thing about this is now I'm particularly attuned to listening to noise, both both from my kind of also experimental music background, but also from listening to these type of things. But the noise, the fan was also increasing in speed.
Was accelerating,
You had like a tempo increase, but also a frequency, and the pitch kind of also went up a little bit. Quite musical in a sense, and then you got this drop.
Can we hear it again? Only that part, so that everybody listens. So it's that, let's say, some kind of boring sound, and then it accelerates a little bit, gets higher, and then it's.
Let's try again.
Beautiful.
So I just found it to be a very interesting and very musical kind of quality to the sound, and that was totally unexpected. And usually people wouldn't think about this at all. The interesting thing, though, is that now I was standing down in the technical room where this was very present. Of course, I have the same ventilation system here in my office, and it's quite annoying. Actually, it's sitting up here. It's probably filtered out on this recording, but that also inspired me that there is so much noise around us all the time, sonic noise, particularly from ventilation systems, but also from other types of fans that we have around. It can be a projector. Actually, last weekend I was in a cabin out in the forest, really beautiful, silent space, and I was standing still inside of this cabin. And most people would think that this is a super cozy and quiet environment. But there was this refrigerator there making a horrible noise. So it was this extremely absurd experience of standing in the middle of the forest, watching the trees outside and listening to a few birds singing here and there, and generally the quietness of everything. But the hum and the kind of high-pitched, unpleasant hum of a fridge standing there next to me. So it's kind of these things that now I'm as I'm becoming more and more interested in the background of our lives, I notice these things, and I try to think about, well, perhaps you should actually pay more attention to these backgrounds and kind of think about, well, it's nice to get fresh air into a room, but it's also the sonic qualities of that and the aesthetics of that and the impact it has on us. I think we haven't discussed enough in our societies now, because at least here in Norway, all modern buildings have ventilation systems these days, and many of them are quite noisy. But also we have projectors, we have fridges, we have computers with fans. We have, I mean, it's basically everywhere you go, there is some kind of noise, electric noise of some kind. And
right, it's a drone. It's a drone in different frequencies, and
exactly.
And you don't know how they add up, and maybe give you an interference frequency that is maybe not healthy for you.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not saying that it's necessarily unhealthy. I mean, sometimes it can be pleasant. I mean, this in the sound example I played now, I think is quite pleasant. But I don't think people think enough about kind of how that impacts us and our lives and our bodies and minds.
And that's also when you buy a new fridge, for example, they will tell you how cold it might be.
Yeah. And
they might tell you how many electricity it needs, which already, I don't know if every fridge is doing it, but they never give you the sound, what kind of sound it will
sometimes
produce.
You can ask for sometimes you can get the kind of the loudness of it, the decibel measurement, but still the decibel measurement is quite different from the actual sound, because you can have a low decibel, but you can have a very unpleasant, still from an aesthetic point of view, unpleasant sounds.
Right. I'm just have a look. I think it's called Quiet Mic. That there is an organization that collect all the information about, let's say, modern electronics, and measure how loud they are and what frequencies. I will put it in the show notes when I find it. Thank you. That's very, very interesting. You also told me when we talked before about a project you did at the Norwegian Broadcasting. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? And it was about with or without conducting. So there was an experiment that you did with them.
Yeah. So this is an experiment we are actually planning now with the Norwegian Radio Orchestra. And the idea here is that we want to look at how the musicians in an orchestra how they move and how they their bodies respond in a musical setting. So we started to do some experiments with another orchestra, Stavanger Symphony Orchestra, that was more of an exploratory study where we equipped all the musicians with a belt that measures their respiration, their breathing, but also their heart rate and their motion, how they move. And so we know that we're able to do this now, which is a massive undertaking when you have like 70 musicians on stage and actually trying to capture all of them in a setting like this. So now we are doing a more controlled study with the Norwegian Radio Orchestra, where we are looking specifically at then how they will respond with and without a conductor. And the interesting thing here is that when musicians play in smaller groups and ensembles, they don't typically use a conductor. If you have a quartet or an octet even, because then the musicians rely on watching each other and listening to each other. And this we have studied quite a bit in the past with looking at different string quartets. So we've done an experiment with the Danish string quartet, a project called Music Lab Copenhagen, which was done right after Corona. So it was the first concert they did after Corona. So that was exciting on its own because people were finally you can go back to a concert hall, which was an amazing experience, I have to say, for both for the musicians and for the audiences, and saying that live music is not the same as mediated music. But there we also looked at the musicians and used similar technologies to measure their heart rates and respiration, and also we looked at how and where they look. And we found many interesting things, including also that the musicians have particular patterns for looking at each other and also listening to each other, tuning to each other. And in fact, even with the Danish string quartet, we even found that they actually synchronized their heartbeats while playing, which is quite incredible, really, thinking about it. But that's showing how kind of tuned they are to each other. And we're doing more research to try to understand exactly why and how that happens. But now we're scaling this up to look at an entire orchestra, which is a totally different thing. And of course, when you have, say, 70 musicians on stage that will do something together, so they're both together and need to follow the score and be precise in every single way. But they're also doing different things, right? So each musician, or perhaps not each musician, but at least each group are playing different things. So there are many, many things going on at the same time. And still they manage to kind of synchronize in the line and hit the right kind of beats, etc., which is quite incredible, really, when you think about the complexity of what's going on. And that's why you need a conductor, typically, to help with aligning and help with telling the musicians you should come in here and there and then keeping track of the tempo, etc. But then there are orchestras that are interested in exploring how we can do this without a conductor. And now we're going to try to see how this works, playing the same piece with and without the conductor and measuring what's happening then with the musicians as well, how they approach it, how it impacts the music, etc. So it's really fascinating. And also, again, trying to, we have our hypothesis, but also then trying to gather empirical evidence for that support this hypothesis will be an important thing as we move forward.
What's the hypothesis?
Well, there are, for one thing, playing without a conductor, we assume that the musicians will need to be more attentive. They will, to put it in a metaphorical sense, they will need to sit more on the tip of their chair and follow and what's going on. They need to kind of look around and listen more attentively to to the others. We are particularly interested in seeing how the instrument groups behave, because if you're playing in a violin section and you're playing the same as your neighbors, of course, then you will relate more to your neighbors. I mean, and you will follow along there. But how will you, for example, attend to what they do in the woodwinds, which is a different group playing something else? And it's this kind of multi-processing of information, both kind of locally, kind of something similar to what you're doing yourself, but also thinking about other groups and also the holistic of the orchestra, that we are very, very curious to see. And we expect to find that the musicians will be perhaps less precise in a way, if you want to measure it mathematically. But we also believe that the music may be more interesting ultimately, because it's less precise, and it's this human thing about the same thing with if you think about just rhythm, which is only one part of music, but an important part, is that we as humans, we like repetition, but we also like variation. So at my research center called Ritmo, we study rhythm in different ways. And here the kind of the general thing we're interested in is exactly to look at the repetition and variation, and how you need a certain level of repetition for it to be a rhythm, but you also need a certain level of variation to make it interesting. So we don't really like to listen to like plain metronome, for example. It's just quickly becomes boring. But we don't really like to listen to pure noise either. So it's something in between, and it's finding that balance that we find interesting. What's that right balance?
That's beautiful, and that's also the analogy in the power of music thinking. We're not necessarily only focused on music, then it would be the power of music. But in the power of music thinking, it's like, okay, what is music doing? Or is there something in music that we can learn from? And if you use this example for an organization, a company with 60 or 70 people in different sections, in different units, and how they synchronize themselves. A few episodes before, we had Harvey Seifter, and he was the CEO of the Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. And you might know them. They're since 50 years. They're doing nothing else than playing without a conductor. They even don't rehearse with a conductor. And there was one trick that he shared with us, or one trick. Everybody had the full score, at least for the rehearsals, to see what happens somewhere else when I'm doing this. And I think that might be also an interesting part. So it's not only about you or your group, it's your group in relation to all the others when we talk about the symphony.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And one of the underlying theoretical models that we're building on here is of what we call entrainment, which is an old physics principle, but where the idea is that when you have two or more systems with some kind of periodic pattern, or oscillating systems, as you can call them, they will influence each other, and they will kind of drag each other to synchrony. And this is something you can observe also if you walk on the street with someone you know. You will typically entrain to the other's walking pattern. So you will see that you will, or if you are out running and doing running together with others, you will see that you typically synchronize your footsteps. And this is through entrainment processes where you kind of drag each other into kind of synchrony. The opposite is also true. If you walk on the street and there's a stranger in front of you, you might try to explicitly not entrain to that person's footsteps, because it may be a bit kind of sneaky, kind of to entrain with someone else. So this we do consciously all the time. And of course, in more complex settings, like an orchestra or even an organization, I guess you entrain to others. I mean, that's how we live in the world. I mean, we entrain all the time to things around us. Also, when you speak to other people, they will start nodding with you, and you will gesticulate, and all these things are also based on the same principles. And we are very interested in kind of understanding the underlying mechanisms of these entrainment processes, how they work. And again, also from a music technology perspective, I'm very interested in also seeing how can we model this with computers, and how can we also make, for example, computer sounds and music that entrain to people in various ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That coming together. It's like when you ask 100 people to clap, at the very end, they will clap in some kind of unison.
Sure,
And
that's fascinating too. I mean, it's amazing how people are able to do these things. I mean, or even thousands of people can clap in synchrony without really any training. It's a very deeply rooted kind of human possible kind of way of behaving, you could say.
Wow. So there's a lot to explore, and there's a lot to do and a lot to share. So, Alexander, thank you. Is there anything that you want to share that we didn't touch?
No, I think we talked about a lot.
Right. So then, thank you very much. I will also put in the show notes links like how to reach you, how to get more information about your project. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate this, because listening is one of the top leadership skills, and I feel honored about this. It is my mission to find, create, and share inspirations for meaningful collaboration based on music analogies. If you want to support this, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, or write a review on iTunes or Spotify. And more inspirations can be found on musicthinking.com. We have a blog, and you can download the Music Thinking Framework. And finally, I would love to hear your feedback. And if you need help with a business challenge, please reach out to me via email, podcast@musicthinking.com.